What if I told you that the empire which destroyed Rome ruled the Mediterranean for a century, built a navy that made emperors beg, sacked the eternal city with more discipline than Rome ever showed its enemies? And today, their name is used as a word for mindless destruction. You have never been told the truth about the Vandals. Until now. In the year 455 AD, the gates of Rome opened. Not because the Romans surrendered, not because the walls were breached, not because an army overwhelmed the defenders. The gates opened because the emperor was already dead, murdered 3 days earlier by his own men, and the city had no one left to protect it. What entered through those gates was not a mob of savages. It was a disciplined, organized naval superpower, led by a king who had spent years planning this exact moment. They stayed for 14 days. They took everything of value: the gold, the silver, the sacred treasures of the Jerusalem temple that Rome had looted 4 centuries earlier. They took the empress. They took her daughters. They took half the wealth of the ancient world. And then they left. Not a single church was burned. Not a single citizen was massacred. The most disciplined sack in the history of civilization. And today, their name is used as a synonym for mindless destruction. To understand who the Vandals were, you need to forget everything you think you know about the fall of Rome. The conventional story is simple. Rome was great. Barbarians were primitive. Barbarians destroyed Rome. The end. But historian Peter Heather at King's College London spent decades analyzing the primary sources of this period. His conclusion, documented in his landmark work, The Fall of the Roman Empire, is far more complicated and far more interesting. The peoples Rome called barbarians were not primitive. They were adaptive. They learned. They watched Rome for generations. They traded with Rome. They served in Roman armies. They absorbed Roman technology, Roman administration, Roman military tactics. And then, when Rome weakened, they did not destroy it. They competed to replace it. The Vandals were a Germanic people who had lived along the Baltic coast for centuries. They were pushed west by the Huns, crossed the Rhine in the winter of 406 AD, when the river froze solid and an entire people walked across into Roman territory. They spent years moving through Gaul, through Spain, fighting Romans, fighting other Germanic tribes, building a reputation not for savagery, but for something far more dangerous: military discipline, tactical intelligence, and an extraordinary ability to adapt. In 429 AD, their king Genseric made a decision that would change the ancient world forever. He looked south, across the Strait of Gibraltar, at the Roman province of North Africa, and he crossed. 80,000 people, men, women, children, soldiers, craftsmen, an entire civilization on the move. Within 10 years, they had taken Carthage. Not the ruins of the old Carthage that Rome had destroyed. The rebuilt Carthage, the richest city in the Western Mediterranean, the grain supply of the entire Roman Empire. And here is where the story becomes extraordinary. Genseric did not rule like a conqueror. He ruled like an emperor. He reorganized the tax system. He maintained the infrastructure. He kept the ports running. He kept the grain flowing. And then he built something Rome never had: a navy. A real navy. Not transport ships, not riverboats. Warships, hundreds of them, fast, maneuverable, crewed by men who had learned seamanship on the Mediterranean coast. Within a decade, the Vandal fleet controlled the Western Mediterranean: Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, the Balearic Islands. All fell under Vandal control. Rome, The empire that had ruled the Mediterranean for 5 centuries suddenly could not move troops or supplies without Vandal permission. This is the context nobody teaches you when they tell you about the sack of Rome. By the time Genseric sailed his fleet north toward the mouth of the Tiber in June of 455 AD, he was not a raider. He was the most powerful ruler in the Western world. The Emperor Maximus had fled the city when he heard the fleet approaching. He was torn apart by a Roman mob before he even reached the city gates. The Empress Eudoxia herself, according to the historian Procopius, had invited Genseric to come, had sent him a message asking him to free her from a man who had destroyed her family. When Genseric arrived, the Pope met him at the city gates and negotiated terms. No killing, no burning, no torture. Only property. Genseric agreed. For 14 days, the Vandals dismantled the wealth of Rome with the precision of an inventory. They took the treasures Titus had brought from the Temple of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The golden menorah, the silver trumpets, objects considered sacred by millions of people across 3 continents. When 14 days were over, they sailed back to Carthage. Rome was poorer, but it was standing. The Vandal kingdom endured for nearly a century after the sack. Genseric himself ruled until 477 AD, making him one of the longest reigning monarchs of the ancient world. Under his successors, Carthage became a center of Mediterranean culture. Scholars worked there, artists worked there. The Roman administrative system continued to function. Archaeologist Andy Merrills of the University of Leicester, one of the foremost experts on Vandal history, has spent years excavating sites in North Africa. His findings paint a picture not of destruction, but of continuity. Roman mosaics from this period show no break in artistic tradition. The economy continued. The cities functioned. The Vandal kingdom was not a footnote to Roman history. It was a successor state, a legitimate power, one of the most sophisticated political entities of the late antique world. So why does nobody know this? Because in 533 AD, the Eastern Roman Emperor Justinian sent his greatest general Belisarius to reclaim North Africa. The campaign lasted less than 2 years. The Vandal kingdom fell. And what happened next is one of the most deliberate acts of historical erasure in the ancient world. Justinian did not simply conquer the Vandals, he erased them. The Vandal nobility was deported to the eastern frontier, dispersed across Asia Minor, Syria, Egypt, forbidden to maintain contact with each other, forbidden to preserve their culture. Procopius, the court historian of Justinian, wrote the history of this period. And Procopius worked for the man who had destroyed the Vandals. His account was the account that survived. His characterization of the Vandals as savages was the characterization that entered the historical record. The victors wrote the history, and the losers became a word for vandalism. There is something deeply unsettling about this story, not because of what the Vandals did, but because of what was done to them afterward. An entire civilization, a century of history, a kingdom that controlled the Mediterranean, reduced to a slur. The Vandals sacked Rome, they built an empire, they ruled for a century, and then they were erased. Their name became a word for destruction, but their story is a reminder that every civilization you have never heard of was erased by one you have. The question worth asking is not who the Vandals were. The question is, who else has been forgotten, and why?